Welcome to the Geniuses of Copywriting podcast, a peek into the minds and strategies of the world's greatest copywriters, marketers, and persuasion experts. And now, here's your host, Brian Casangina.
Hey guys, welcome to the Geniuses of Copywriting podcast. I'm really honored today to have a good friend of mine on the call, Lukas Resheske. He's a top copywriter, lives in LA, and I met him for the first time. It was about a year ago now, wasn't it, Lukas? I think I was in the States. So I guess that means a trip back there is long overdue. So I hear they have these things called airplanes now, so there's no excuse. But that was cool to meet you there and take part in your mastermind. But I wonder if you could tell the listeners, a bit about yourself and how you got started. So thanks for coming on the call, and I hope you're well today.
Yeah, happy to. Yeah. So I kind of came around a weird way of starting. I was in the military, and I thought I was going to be in the military forever.
Yeah.
And then right around sophomore year of college, realized I didn't want to be separated from my wife for 6 months out of the year for the next 20 years. So made a lifestyle choice, went to the National Guard instead of the Army so that I could have a civilian career as well as an Army career, and dove kind of headfirst into the marketing and online business world. Took me a little ways to get to copywriting, but my first mentor was Mike Dillard. He's the guy who hired me right out of college, and he's obviously an incredible copywriter and turned me onto the craft. After bouncing around Facebook ads, funnels, that kind of thing, I settled on copywriting, and then that's pretty much it. Like I committed to that in like 2013, 2014-ish, and then have gone on from there. Worked with a bunch of different clients. Mike was obviously the first one, and then guys like Ryan Levesque, Josh Turner, Harlan Kilstein, did some work with Jason Henderson and a lot of other people. And I've been able to be pretty successful on my own business, and then successful training other copywriters as well with my mentorship program, which started around 2016.
Yeah. And I remember coming along to one of those meetings in LA last year. And
which was awesome, by the way. Like, it was cool because you bringing your experience from Mind Valley, and then we had Bond there who was this awesome insight. That was fun.
Yeah, it was. And the caliber of people that you had there, that's what I found really interesting, because it's not like you're just training, new copywriters who have never done anything. There was some serious, people in that room who were learning from you. So, that was what I found amazing. How did you set this kind of thing up? Because for a lot of people who are listening to this probably want to become coaches in whatever area they are. And one thing that I could see immediately there, that you were teaching people who already had, the track record, and they'd already had some success, and they just wanted to level up. So it's not a beginner's group at all. So how did you, how did you arrive at that position with your coaching program?
So the coaching program started as most things do, as a good suggestion from my wife that I went with. I didn't even think of it. I was overwhelmed with work in early 2016, and I needed people to help me. And so I was thinking I was going to bring on a cub to kind of do the grunt research work and all that kind of stuff. But she suggested that I have people pay me to learn my process, and then by so doing also help me with the work as I was going through it. And I'm like, that's really smart. So I wrote the sales letter, which was a Facebook post, and put it in a Facebook group full of copywriters, which I would not recommend doing today, because that was I probably stepped on the group owner's toes, and haven't done it since. But got some people interested, and they paid, and I was like, wow, that's a thing. 3 turned into 7. Those 7 had a fantastic experience. I over delivered, but I also systematized what I was teaching, because at that point I never taught anyone how to do what I did. I kind of copied what my old mentor did to me, and then made it a little more like Army-ish. I had that experience training troops and, developing training plans and that sort of thing. And then it just evolved through, the effort of myself and my wife. And we kind of turned it into what amounts to be like a real legit program now, training it. But what I noticed was that from the raw beginner who just figured out what copywriting is to the veteran, most of them never had any sort of like structured traditional training in the craft, period. Like they, even the veterans, like, you know, they had their mentor and did the handwriting and did the reading of the books and all this kind of stuff. But there's so many gaps in the knowledge of even someone who's been through and been in the craft for a while, that teaching what I would consider to be the fundamentals and the principles and like the stepping stones of how I see things between consumer psychology and behavioral economics and all this kind of stuff, and really building it that way, that's valuable for a lot of people. So I don't think that I have any sort of special like tactic that someone's going to come and learn from me. I think that I just kind of put everything that I feel like you should learn into one place. And that's been valuable for beginners and for veterans. So that's why I think I attract the kind of people that I do.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really, you know,
not trying to be too like,
yeah.
No, I'm trying to toot my own horn here.
No, that's fair enough. But it's what I'm thinking, it's about, you know, fundamentals that we all use. Like even after 15 years, you know, if I forget something as fundamental as you know, including, you know, enough proof elements on a sales page, then that's not going to work nearly as well as if I included that. So that's kind of the thing that I get from what you're saying there.
And it's a lot to keep in your head. You know, a lot of I wasn't this way. I didn't really have a system for writing. I just kind of went off the top of my head on what I could remember. And that's hard, like, cause you'll write something good, but you'll miss a key element. Like you said, like the proof elements, or you'll forget to make a logical jump between like where they're at versus where you're at. And it's just, so it helps to have something a little bit more all encompassing.
Yeah, sure. So. But the question that I want to ask you is you know, you spoke quickly about your military background as a bit before, and what I'm thinking is, you know, the stereotypical thing that we're thinking about the military is that you know, it's all disciplined and you know, it's all about the discipline, that, you know, the things about the military that we think about. You know, is that the case, and how has that helped you training copywriters?
So yeah, the discipline helps, but I think that's just a tiny like front facing part of the military, you know, where everyone sees, you know, the men moving in formation and like the cool, you know, like all that
for non-military people like me, we don't have that insight that you do, so that's why it's valuable.
Right. So I mean, it is valuable to be able to like, for lack of a better word, force yourself to do something you don't want to do, which is basically what discipline is. But then a lot of the military, especially leaders in the military, junior leaders in the military, which I never extended past like into like, you know, like the higher echelons of leadership, where it becomes very like managing hundreds and hundreds of people. Yeah. But in the more, you know, tactical junior levels of leadership, it was a lot of problem solving, a lot of creative problem solving, because you're the ones with, you know, the boots on the ground, and you've got a plan, but then you have to execute that plan. And one of the truisms that, I think it was Dwight Eisenhower that said it, but, you know, he's who I remember. He was like, your plan never survives first contact with the enemy. Yeah. And so being able to think creatively and solve problems was actually more valuable than as valuable, if not more valuable, than the discipline that background brings. Because, and you notice this a lot, actually, like there's a lot of huge companies now that are started or run by former military, like GoRuck is one of the obvious examples to bring up. They've got the backpacks and they're huge. And then, you know, there's coffee companies. There's lots of entrepreneurs coming in. There's lots of senior executives who are coming from the military. And I think it's not the discipline so much as it's the creative problem solving and being able to work with a team. That's
really interesting. Can you have one without the other? So if you're just disciplined but not creative, or if you're creative but not disciplined, does that work as well, or do you need both elements?
It can. I think you need both to succeed at a higher level, because at a certain point, creativity becomes chaotic and uncontrollable if you don't have any sort of discipline to put a lid on it. But with just discipline, you end up just grinding. You know, it's like for example, I've seen both, right? I've seen really talented copywriters who have no process, hate editing, So they can write really well, but there's no like rhyme or reason. Like one thing will knock it out of the park and then the next four will fail miserably. But then there's the disciplined people who, without creativity, who will like handwrite every day. You know, they will hit their numbers. They'll post content every day. Like it's very linear and with no growth whatsoever for years. And I think it's because they're lacking that spark of, you know, reacting to the reality of what's happening, and just, you know, a lot of that, which I mean, comes back to funnels and marketing, because so much of what we do is based in principle, like human behavior, like people don't change, but it's also based in like right now tactics of what's working, what people are saying, what the zeitgeist is, all this kind of stuff. So I think you have to have both to really.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, you know, we want to sort of play to our strengths, and we might not feel that we have one or the other, but I guess if we have even a tiny bit of discipline, you know, at least you've got something to work with.
And it doesn't, I mean, you hear the stories of like the entrepreneurs, or like, you know, like waking up at 4 a.m. and, you know, like if you've listened to a podcast with Jocko Willenick, the dude's an animal. He's like, wake up at 4 a.m. and stop putting carbs in your mouth. Like just this kind of mentality. You don't need to be a Navy SEAL and have that level of discipline in order to be successful. It's just not true. But if you notice a lack of discipline in your life, then it might be better to cultivate a bunch of habits, or like a few habits that can help. And if you notice a lack of creativity, like you're just kind of doing the same thing and not getting results, then it helps to kind of like branch out a little bit. And I think people go to the extreme real quick.
Yeah, there's always extremes, and there's kind of a middle ground, which is where most of us live. But it's really interesting, you know, that you mentioned the fact that you don't have to be a Navy SEAL to do this stuff. I mean, and the equivalent of this is you don't need to be like a Clayton Makepeace or John Carlton to either, you know, write the copy, world-class copy, or you know, to teach other copywriters, teach other high-level copywriters who have probably been writing copy for 10 years. You don't need to be the ultimate expert to do either of those things. I mean, obviously it helps as good as you can get, but one thing that I see a lot of people that and I've suffered from this myself as well in the past, you know, the intimidation factor of, you know, who am I to teach this person, you know, how to improve their copy game when they're already making millions a year, you know, and they want to level up. And so how do you reconcile that with because you teach experienced copywriters, you don't teach beginners too much, but you also write your own copy.
I teach both. I teach both.
Oh, you do teach beginners,
I would say that my program is actually like more geared towards a beginner, just so that they can have that fundamental basis. But it's not like it's not kindergarten, you know. It's tough, and a lot of people come into it for that reason, but a lot of veterans come into it for that reason too, like we said in the beginning, like that lack of like the gaps in knowledge, or like the blind spots or whatever.
But I'm just sort of kind of wondering, do you have some kind of deliberate process to get over that, or is it just kind of instinctive that you don't have these blockages when it comes to teaching people who are already experts?
Yeah, so I have a couple answers to that, like in sequence. So I think naturally I tend to be a little bit more like able to teach what I know as confidently. And that might just come from a personality. It might come from the military. I don't know. Like, cause as a junior leader, you come in, you're put in a leader position. But there are people underneath you who you outrank, who have been in for way longer and have way more experience. In general, like for example, a brand new second lieutenant coming out of the ROTC program is going to be put in charge of a platoon, which is 20 to 40 people, all of which have probably been in the military longer than you. And the guy who reports directly to you is your platoon sergeant. He's probably been in for 15 years. So, you know, you have to learn to be a leader while simultaneously working with people who have more experience than you. That's it, and it's a tough play. So I came up in that helps. But then a big part of it is being confident in what you know and being open to what you don't. So if, I come forward with an insight, a lot of what helps is that I'm not selling any of these veterans. I'm not like going out and cold pitching anyone to come to my thing. They're coming to me for a specific reason. And whether that's some insight that I had in a post and they're like, wow, that's really interesting. A great way to look at that. Let me talk to you some more. A lot of these higher level guys, once you reach like veteran level of copywriting, like you and I, or like, up in the make piece areas of like the, God tier A-list people, what tends to happen is those people are lifelong learners. They constantly want to up level themselves, and they might go to somewhere to get a nugget or to get an insight, and that's all they want, but they're there and they're willing to learn and they're ready to do stuff. So they're more approachable than a lot of people think. In that regard, but it has to be an attractive thing rather than like you go out and try to specifically target them, because we've seen it all. And, the guys above have seen everything. Plus, they've forgotten more than we know. But they can still learn something from a new voice, a new insight, if that insight is, basically attractive to them. And I think that's what comes from it, where I'll say something either in a Facebook post or an interview like this, or, or one of my students will say something and say that they learned it from me, or something like that will go out, and then that will ping the interest of the people who are paying attention. Super organic, and there's no way to track that, but it's like, that's what I've found personally for the people who've been more veteran to come into the programs or come to the events and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And from a civilian perspective, I've led people in companies who have been in similar roles and in similar industries for decades longer than I've been around. And it's always interesting trying to lead those teams. But it's extremely valid what you mentioned about being a lifelong learner, because the ones who make a good team in that environment are the ones who are open to learning, and the ones who don't, immediately rebel against the thought of someone, a younger guy like me coming in to lead that team in that company. And they immediately rebel against that because they've been in that industry since before I was born, and all BS like that that people sometimes suffer from. So I think that's a key to. I can't think it's where it's not important to that lifelong learning.
Yeah, especially now. I mean, and in our field, the tactics and technology change all the time in our field, and obviously the human principles don't. But then there's always a level of mastery and understanding that you can have in those things that is progressive. So it's not enough to learn NLP once, or it's not enough to learn about cognitive biases once. You have to see how they apply in different areas all the time.
You don't learn the thing and then you know it, and then you don't need to study it anymore. It's not how it. So that's an attitude that I think will hold you back. Exactly.
Yeah. And it's so, and then there's the double-edged sword of that, right? Where being a constant learner is a good thing, but not combining that with doing and getting the actual experience is a real danger. A lot of people tend to just kind of be, I call them armchair copywriters, where they'll just read everything and watch everything, but never write or do anything. And that's tough. That's a tough position to be in, because then that's the real imposter syndrome. Where you learn a lot, you think you know a lot, but you've never actually done anything, and your heart knows that, and you're like, okay, well, how do I know if I can apply this? And I see that a lot. There's so much confidence issues with a lot of the beginner and intermediate coming through, because I call out that armchair thing, and then they're like, well, shit, that's me. And then they'll come in and they'll have the knowledge, but they'll need to be baby stepped through actually doing it, because they're just not confident in their own knowledge.
They're not used to doing it.
Yeah.
But the implementation is a new thing for them.
Yep. Yeah. The implementation, and making that connection between okay, I know I need a headline that captures attention. Now what?
Yeah. Because you get in that situation, you can often, know a formula the way it's supposed to be, but it's really powerful what you said before, which comes from the military, that that Dwight Eisenhower said, your plan never survives the first contact with the enemy. So as soon as something deviates from that strict formula that they've learned in their studies, that's when things fall apart. And I think that's one of the problems with a lot of the business opportunity IM sort of crowd. Lovely people, but they're more about getting into the study of the thing and hang out in the groups than they are with the actual implementation.
And they're all looking for that. I mean, and this is not just them. Like, this happens in weight loss. It happens in personal development. It happens in most like personal transformation industries. But they're looking for that one thing that will work no matter what. Yeah. Like that magic bullet. And it's easy to shit on the magic bullet. I'm sorry. I don't know if I can curse on this podcast.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
It's easy to like make fun of the magic bullet.
Yeah.
Right. But it's a real mentality for a lot of these people, because there's a mix of like desperation and also cynicism of like, I just need to find this thing.
Yeah. The one thing that works. Yeah.
And that's, I mean, it's understandable from that perspective.
That's what sells. I mean, magic bullets sell.
Right.
They don't necessarily help the people, but
sell once.
Yeah.
That's the thing. They sell once, and then you don't sell anything else to those people.
Yeah.
Because your thing didn't work.
Yeah, unless they're so rabid a market that they keep looking for a different magic bullet.
Yeah, or if you're like manipulated enough where you can be like, oh yeah, I know that thing I first sold you didn't work, but this is the real thing.
Yeah.
And then try to spin that as far as you can. I don't try to play that way, but
no.
Sometimes it works for some people at a certain like what I've noticed, and this is just something that I've seen, is that a lot of minorly successful publishers in these spaces, fitness, personal development, will hit like a 6 or 7 figure cap of income. And that's usually the reason.
Yeah.
Is they're able to convince new people that their thing is the thing, but they're not able to take those new people through a result and transformation to the next thing.
Yeah.
Not always, obviously. That's not a blanket statement, but I have noticed that happens a lot.
Yeah, and it's something that Gary Halbert used to talk about as well. Like if people were selling more to experienced business owners and entrepreneurs rather than the newbie BizOp market, he'd say, you should sell to the BizOp market because there's so much money there. Which is really interesting, because his advice is so valuable for entrepreneurs and more experienced people. And obviously he's the real deal. This is Gary Halbert we're talking about. But even he recognized that if you did sell to that market, so much money in there. So many new people coming through all the time. But like you and I are saying, we don't want to do that because we want to sleep at night and want to build a sustainable business. So we're not advising that you sell magic bullets.
And it's interesting because I've been rereading some of Dan Kennedy's stuff, some of his books, and right now I'm working my way through the like Wealth Attraction and a New Economy book. And one of the mentalities that he's always had is it's your responsibility to sell the thing as hard as you can to these people, but you're not responsible for what they do with it afterward.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. You're not responsible for someone driving the car after you've sold the car.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to give them driving lessons for free. You don't have to make sure that it doesn't stay parked in their lot.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when you're looking at these transformation industries where someone wants to make a personal transformation, it's incredibly difficult for a person to make a transformation. And I feel like the customer becomes infinitely more valuable if you do put in the extra effort to get them that initial transformation. And I pan that out in my own stuff with my mentorship program. And I've also like panned that out with a lot of clients who I've kind of pushed to give more, do more. Because I think that that's what this industry has lacked for a long time, is that like the aftercare, basically, like helping them move past it. And I think that once you help someone move past it and that initial transformation, they are locked into you. they will sing your praises. They will tell everyone about you. I think that's really valuable, especially today with social media and
true.
About information.
True, because in the golden age of these copywriters we're talking about, they didn't have the social media that we have now. They didn't have the exposure. I mean, it's like the perception that most people have now, which is fair enough that there's so many bad things happening in the world. But the truth is, and you'll know this if you're on Peter Diamanda's list, that the world is actually in the best state it's ever been. But it just seems bad because of all the social media and all the instant news that we have. So it's just a perception. But going back to your original point, we do have kind of a duty of care, and if we do create these transformations in people, and this is why your coaching programs are valuable, then they'll become fans for life. Yeah.
But it's interesting because it's also like, as you were talking, I just thought of another example. This is not unique to just information publishing. I mean, one of the biggest issues that medical doctors have with patients is them taking all of their medication. There's this, I forget the actual medical term, but it's something like antibiotic resistance or something like that. Like, there's a big medical problem happening because people are not taking their entire medicine, right? So they're prescribed these 30 pills or whatever, this 4-week course of medication, and they do not complete the medication. For whatever reason. Either they forget, they don't care, they start feeling better, whatever. But it's not just a publishing or information industry problem. It's the fact that human beings tend to not complete things. And so I think that when in the past, it's been very profitable and honestly probably more sanity producing to just allow that. And just be okay with it. But I think now today there's significant economics in helping people get over that hump and help themselves. We'll see if it pans out on a big scale, but I think that there is.
I agree with that. Now, what I think that people should be wary of, and tell me if you agree with this or not, is that there's still a group out there who thinks that coaches and mentors should publish all the results of their students and make sure that every single one of their students is making $1 million a year or having some massive success in their industry, and that's just not possible. You can't be concerned with that game, because a lot of people, and as human beings, you and I are genuinely concerned about the success of our students. But there's always a group out there who will kind of require that we create transformation in every single person that we take money from, or we should refund them, and that kind of thing. So that's like going a bit too far. We can't guarantee success in everyone, especially when so much of a person's success is dependent on the action that they take. And fundamentally, Dan Kennedy is right. We can't make a person. We can't go to a person's door or knock on their door and ask if they've done that thing yet, which it's the first step in their success. So, but it is different today than what it was before. We do have that duty of care.
Yeah. Well, to your point, I mean, there is probably a very vocal contingent of people who demand that any information publisher or coach or transformation expert or something like that, basically, if you're taking their money, then they should get the result. But I'd refer back to the car analogy for those people. Like, if you sell someone a car, are you required to make them drive the car?
Are you required to make?
Are you responsible when they crash? Honestly, are you responsible for them doing the maintenance to make sure the thing doesn't crash? No.
Do you check? Do you give them a call and are you speeding in the car right now?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, there's a certain amount of personal responsibility that I think any industry anywhere needs to understand about its clientele. But to the people who demand that any expert, transformation person get those results, those people are not worth talking to, because I'll look right back at them and say, okay, what have you bought that you completed?
True.
show me. Like
Yeah.
I will put money down that
Yeah.
the vast majority of those people have not completed the programs that they bought.
Yeah, the problem is that they can be vocal and they can seem like they're a powerful force, but behind the scenes, yeah,
the vocal minority is a systemic global problem in so many different industries right now that it's not just in transformation. I mean, you see it in politics, you see it in every single industry, you see it in relationships. It's systemic, and I think it's because the technology of the day amplifies anyone's voice. Like anyone can have a voice nowadays with the technology, and human nature tends to amplify anger and vitriol and like drama. We human beings inherently enjoy conflict, and because of that, that's what gets pushed. So if everybody's voice is amplified in the same way, but we enjoy conflict, then obviously the things that escalate conflict and drama are going to be the most prevalent. And there's I use the term silent majority not as a political phrase, because a lot in America they're using that to describe like a lot of who votes for someone. But the true silent majority of people who just really don't give enough of a crap about the topic to say anything, those people are never heard. They're silent. And so it naturally selects for these vocal minority people who sound bigger than they are, because that's what you're seeing and your perception is that. And it's completely, utterly false information. Like it's bad data.
Yeah.
That's how I see it personally.
Yeah, that's very important. It's something to really think about. I think that we need to remember these things when we are going along our journey, because it's so easy to get derailed. There's a million things already coming at us. We don't need to voluntarily, get derailed by this kind of avoidable stuff. So, So let me ask you this before we wrap up: who is the weirdest or quirkiest copywriter or marketer that you know of?
The weirdest or quirkiest copywriter or marketer. See, there's a lot of weird, quirky people. I think that I think that some of them do it as a marketing thing. Like that's their personality. For example, a guy named Brian G. Johnson. He's a quirky personality, right? That's how he carries himself, and he's done it forever. And I think, it's him, but it's also his marketing.
Yeah.
So that's one name that pops into my head. But I think, I don't know. Like I'm trying to, everybody has a personality that they portray. Even Gary Halbert had the personality that he portrayed. He wanted to be the Ernest Hemingway of copywriting, basically. And he did. He succeeded. He looked just like the guy. David Ogilvy was a character, dude. He wore a cape to meetings.
Maybe that's what's missing for me. I should start wearing capes.
Yeah.
It's too hot in Thailand for a cape, though.
In LA too. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff. So no one really springs to mind that's like genuinely like, holy wow, this person is weird. But I can immediately put a dozen people into a box of like, okay, this is his personality. This is his character. This is who he is.
Yeah. And Dan Kennedy, who you mentioned before, is one of those, because he's like got that whole persona based on
actively
on the way he wants to portray himself to its market. He talks about to the evils of cell phones, and he doesn't know how to use a computer. And I think you still got to fax him if you want to hire him, right?
Yep. Yeah, I think
you've got to find a fax machine and fax him. And if he wants to fax you back, I don't know what you're gonna do. But unless you actually have a fax. I haven't even lived in a house for 10 years that's actually had a landline. So
right,
I didn't have one at home.
And I like I said, I was reading his book, and he was actually talking about that on how it's obviously deliberately cultivated. Yeah. But it's also now a burden. Like he has to maintain that persona.
Yeah, he can't suddenly be like on social media. I mean, if you see a Dan Kennedy profile on Facebook, it's probably fake. So he can't get on social media and start posting content and have selfies of him in front on the beach with a laptop or anything. That's a complete 180 from all the marketing he's spent the last 40 years compiling.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like didn't Gene Simmons get married recently to that Shannon girl he was with for a long time?
I'm not sure. I don't follow like celebrity stuff too much.
Because I know when he spoke at the GKRC conference, I think he was. I think I may have heard something about that, but one of his things that he had for such a long time is that he was totally against marriage, and he was with this girl for a long time, and no matter how successful he got in his business, he was never going to get married, just as against the principle. So he can never turn around and get married. Like, it's like Dan Kennedy can't be seen walking around at a seminar, using apps on a cell phone, because it's completely against that whole persona that he's built up.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, he can't even really walk around at a seminar.
Yeah, true.
Not really. He's got to stay in the green room or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, he's built up this wall around him. But yeah, like that, Dan's a great example, but I think a lot of people have built that type of persona around themselves as a certain type of person, and they're kind of stuck with it. Unless they're serial reinventors, like some of the people I've seen who've been reinventing themselves, like Justin Bieber and, Lady Gaga, and those kinds of people can do that in order to extend the life of their career. But it's, for marketers especially, we can dig ourselves into a hole by,
Yeah. So that's very interesting. And Dan Kennedy is definitely one of the quirkiest marketers that I know. So
works for him.
So how can people learn more from you? How can people find that and contact you?
Yeah, so I'm pretty easy to find. I'm on social media as Lukas Resheske, just spelled the way that it's on this podcast. That pops up everything. Yeah.
Cool. So people should follow you on Facebook and other stuff. So I know you post on there.
My primary. I'm starting to look a little harder at LinkedIn as a platform that I'll spend time on. Yeah. And then my website is just my name, lukasresheske.com.
Yeah. I'll chuck some links on here as well for people to go to, but they should definitely do that, because I know you know your stuff, and what you shared here is really valuable, and it's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what you can teach people.
It was good talk.
So do that, and I thank you for coming on the call today. So I really appreciate that. So
sure.
Thanks for your time, and I will talk soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Brian. It was fun.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Thank you for listening to Geniuses of Copywriting with Brian Casangina. To get the full transcript and all the resources mentioned on today's show, go to www.geniusesofcopywriting.com now.